Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Right, let's get into the show. We've got the usual, not as much intel this week. There's some big hammers waiting in the wings, but it wasn't ready for this show, but it will be ready for others. Maybe we'll do a special show between now and next week if developments come forward. We've got the op-ed pieces again, including a detailed exposure, and we've got news and also some Q&A in the first hour. Right, let's get into the links. If you want to listen live, it's every Thursday on Spreaker.com at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, and that's Spreaker.com/user/895-5881. You can also listen live on thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. That website is expanding. We've got a search engine now with some of the transcripts that are off the Patreon, and with a lot of new members, I would advise you all to listen to the must listen to shows section in order. It will give you a greater idea of what THI is all about and what we've covered, and a better understanding. So that's at the Think Different. It's also got the shielding, which is important at this time. We've had a lot of fun and games with the smoky people this week. Shield up, grounding and centering documents there as well, and how to also fight off psychic attacks. They're all on the website. That's at thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. We have the archive of the shows also on that site, and the archives are on the YouTube Tommy Williams channel. We have the Facebook page Truth, Honour and Integrity, and the Facebook social media alternative, which is MeWe.com, which is also Truth, Honour and Integrity. We've got the People's Club donations website link, all about the foundation, if you want to go and find out about that. And that's at thepeoplesclub.org. And thanks to all who contributed to my Patreon again last week. And if you want to go and join that, it's patreon.com/TommyW/memberships. The transcripts of all the intel and the op-eds for all the shows, going back at least probably near 2 years now, are all on Patreon, so you can go and check them out. And the email for the show is truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. Right, let's get into some news around the world. A few pieces I've picked up. There's a lot going on in American politics, which I'm going to try and avoid this week, because it's getting a bit stupid. There's far more prevalent things to be dealing with than knowing who's corrupt and who's not. And the reality is most of them are, if not all. And talking about criminality and politicians, a member of the House of Lords in the UK has been charged with 2 counts of attempted rape. Former Labour peer Lord Nazir Hamid of Rotherham is also charged with 1 count of indecent assault. 2 other men, Mohammed Farouk and Mohammed Tariq, both from Rotherham, have also been charged, and all 3 men are due to appear in court on March the 19th. Mr. Farouk is charged with 4 counts of indecent assault also, and Mr. Tariq is charged with 2 counts of indecent assault. So the House of Lords is like the chamber in America. Loads of people who sit there or occasionally turn up, all have titles, and generally do nothing apart from end up in the hellfire caves. For those of you familiar with that, a bit like Bohemian Grove in the UK. A question that lies before those who homeschool their children has now come under scrutiny with another German sounding name. And another bill, this time a bill in Iowa's HF 272 established a fundamental right of the state in the lives of children over those of their parents, really. And Iowa House Democrats' assault on homeschooling families in 2019 continues in the form of yet another bill sponsored by State Representative Mary Masher. And unlike HF 182, another bill Masher filed this session related to homeschooling that eliminates independent private instruction. HF 272 keeps the phrase independent private instruction in the Iowa Code, but requires families selecting that option to submit the same form that was required under competent private instruction. Families who are providing independent private instruction for the first time would also be required to submit proof of their child's required immunisations. See how they roll it in. It's a bill for one, but really it's the sleight of hand, and let's throw some other things in. But that's not the most worst aspect of the bill. Similar to a bill suggested earlier this year by State Representative Art Stade of Democrats of Cedar Rapids, HF 272 requires health and wellness checks of families who engage in independent private instruction or private instruction. And the bill reads, the Board of Directors of a school district shall conduct quarterly home visits to check on the health and safety of children located within the district who are receiving independent private instruction or private instruction. And the bill also states that these home visits shall take place in the child's residence with the consent of the parent, guardian or legal custodian, and also an interview or observation of the child may also be conducted. All very Nazi to me. Papers, please. If parents do not provide consent, then the school district, the juvenile court, or the district court, upon a showing of probable cause, may authorise the person making the home visit to enter the home and interview or observe the child. So in other words, anyone doing homeschooling now has to have injections and agree to their home being invaded 4 times a year. This, what's her name again? Mary Masher. I pulled up her records this week, and she must have put in at least 23 bills this year alone. And I found some others. Each school board shall provide an age-appropriate and research-based instruction in human growth and development, including instruction regarding human sexuality, self-esteem, stress management, interpersonal relationships and consent, domestic abuse, HPV and the availability of a vaccine to prevent HPV, and acquired immune deficiency syndrome as required in section 25611, grades 1 through 12. And so basically she wants sex education discussed on what is consent with sex education to children. And she even put in consent means affirmative, conscious or voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity. In other words, she wants to find out what the kids are up to. It's none of their business, but you know how they get involved. And it is a responsibility of each person involved in sexual activity to ensure that the others consent to engage in sexual activity. And then she puts in another bill, which is very similar but a slight change. Each school board shall provide age-appropriate and research-based instruction in human growth and development, again including human sexuality, self-esteem, stress management for children. Organ and tissue donation was added in for children at school. interpersonal relationships, domestic abuse, HPV, and the availability of a vaccine to prevent it. And this is going into schools, grades 1 through 12, according to Miss Masha. She also added another bill in. A candidate or candidates committee may use campaign funds to pay for expenses related to the care of any dependent of the candidate. Don't they get paid enough? Don't they get enough perks without, everyone else who goes to work has to pay for their own childcare? Well, why should they be any different? But these are atypical of current modern day politicians. Line their back pockets and turn the people into spy zones, interfering in kids' lives, interfering in parents' lives, none of which is helpful. The ones children that are requiring help, they ignore, as we've seen all too often. 2 Californian journalists, that's an oxymoron, requested and were given data on police arrests and convictions over the past 10 years. Nice in a minute. Data protection, all except the people. And what they found was surprising: domestic abuse, child molestation, and even murder. And they were given these documents through a public record request, something journalists exercise frequently, but the California Attorney General Xavier Becerra says it was a mistake and they should never have received it in the first place. Now, Becerra, whose office was responsible for maintaining the information, said the centre had distributed it, but it was not authorised to do so. And he wants the investigative reporting programme at the University of California at Berkeley and its 2 journalists to destroy the files and refrain from publishing them. Not doing so, Becerra claimed, would be against the law, but the Berkeley journalist says they are on solid legal footing and are standing their ground. So they were given data on police officers' arrest and also police officers' convictions, which involved domestic abuse, child molestation and murder. And they want to cover it up. Shocking data that came out, government data, this week, that shows that of the missing children reported to be sex trafficked in 2017, 88% of them had come from the American foster care system. 88% of sex trafficking was in the foster care system. America has a dark secret that no one wants to admit, and talk of this secret will get you labelled as a conspiracy theorist, as we all know. Fake news and outlets report it will have their organic reach throttled by social media and also Google alike. Now, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary, many in the mainstream media and the government refuse to see this very real epidemic of child sex trafficking in the United States. 800 to 900,000 go missing permanently each year. That's outside of the ones that are sex trafficked. And children are being needlessly ripped from homes at such an alarming rate that hundreds of parents in one state have gone so far as to create a counter-kidnapping organisation to stop it. This involves all the remember the piece I did spoke about the 7 bodies or organisations of society. They're all involved in it. Hospitals, social services, child protection, police, judges, politicians, all the ones that are supposed to look after the people. are all involved in this. It's one giant cover-up. And it's not just in America either. It's in every country. A parents' rights organisation filed a letter in federal court last Tuesday asking a federal judge strike down Minnesota's current child protection laws for being too expansive and removing children from loving and safe homes without due process. This was going on in the UK in the 1990s. Families are being abused and in some cases destroyed as a result of laws that are inappropriate, said Dwight Mitchell, the lead plaintiff in the case and founder of the Parents Association. He stated this is legal kidnapping. This legal kidnapping is happening in states across the country and it's contributing to a very real epidemic of child trafficking. The reality of such practices within the United States foster system is outright horrifying. Now, other governmental organisations have corroborated this trend, and in 2013 the FBI did a 70-city nationwide raid. 60% of the victims came from foster care or group homes. In 2014, the New York authorities estimated that 85% of sex trafficking victims were previously in the child welfare system. Connecticut, 2012, police rescued 88 children from sex trafficking. 86 of them were from child welfare system. Equally as disturbing is the fact that most sex trafficked kids come from within the system is a fact that the FBI discovered in a 2014 nationwide raid. Children as young as 11 were never reported missing by child welfare authorities. And last year there was a report on an example of this lack of reporting out of Topeka, Kansas. In the report, the Kansas Department for Children and Families, which oversees foster care in the state, were found to have lost 70 children after a high-profile case of 3 missing sisters garnered the attention of the authorities. This is what's going on, and this is, to me, is far more of an item that needs highlighting and focusing than what Comey or Clinton or the others are doing, even though some of them are involved in this nonsense. We all know that. But it's funny how we've covered word magic and the etymology of certain words. And foster is no different. The term foster means to feed. Comes from fosterian, which means feed, nourish or support, or foster, food. For those of you who remember why we're building the wall, you'll put 2 and 2 together, because this is what's going on, beyond disgusting. The United States has officially shuttered its consulate in Jerusalem this week, downgrading the status of its main diplomatic mission to the Palestinians by folding it into the US Embassy to Israel. For decades, the consulate functioned as a de facto embassy to the Palestinians, and now that outreach will be handled by a Palestinian Affairs unit under the command of the embassy. Now, the symbolic shift hands authority over US diplomatic channels with the West Bank and Gaza to Ambassador David Friedman, a long-time supporter and fundraiser for the West Bank settler movement and a fierce critic of the Palestinian leadership. I'm biting my tongue. I'm really biting my tongue at this point. The announcement from the State Department came early Monday in Jerusalem, and the merger effective that day. This decision was driven by our global efforts to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of our diplomatic engagements and operations, state spokesman Robert Palladino said in a statement. It does not signal a change of US policy on Jerusalem, the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. Well, if it was efficiency and effectiveness, given the mass disparity in wealth of the two countries, wouldn't it have been diplomatic and effective if the Israeli one was rolled into the Palestinian embassy, which is where it should be? Does not signal a change. No, it won't, because the same Israeli policymakers make sure it doesn't change, using blackmail and coercion. Ain't that right, Mr. Trump? An investment bank led by an oligarch who collaborated with Prince Charles on charity work managed a network of offshore companies that was moving billions out of Russia. Go figure. An international investigation this week has now exposed how the network received money from companies linked to major fraud. The oligarch Ruben Vardanyan, who is the former boss of Moscow investment bank Troika Dialog, says he was not involved in the bank's day-to-day operations. Money from the network was sent to the Prince's Charities Foundation to help restore Dumfries House, which is a stately home in Ayrshire, Scotland. And the Prince's Charities said they had subjected Mr. Vardanyan's donations to robust due diligence and no red flags had been raised. Yeah, a bit like all the donations into the Clinton Foundation. But between 2009 and 2011, the Prince's Charities received 3 payments adding up to $202,000 via a now defunct bank in Lithuania. And the leaked bank data shows the last of the payments went to an account held by the Prince's Charities Foundation. Payments were from a company called Qantas Division Limited, which was revealed today to be part of a network of offshore companies that sent billions of dollars out of Russia. A bit like Leo Wunter and his Langley buddies. This is a story from my hometown. And most people, well, in fact, all people from Liverpool will remember the day back in 1993, and it actually happened no more than a couple of 100 yards from where I was living at the time. We all saw the police tape and wondered what had happened. And what had taken place is a 3-year-old child was taken by 2 young boys, aged 10, and brutally assaulted and killed. And the 2 kids, who were 10 at the time, the city turned into vigilantes and wanted to push the van over when they were going to court. I can understand the anger, but it doesn't help. And eventually those 2 got out. I don't think they were kept in for more than 7 years. I think it was less in one case. The father this week lost a legal challenge to try and change a lifelong anonymity order for one of his son's killers. And Mr. Ralph Bulger wanted information on John Venables in particular, and his new identity to be made public. Now, Venables, who was then let out, was then put back in for possessing child abuse images. And Venables and Robin Thompson, both 10, killed the 2-year-old back in 1993, and Bulger's lawyers argued that information about Venables, which was common knowledge, should be made public. However, the president of Family Divisions refused to change the terms of the order, which was designed to protect the uniquely notorious Venables from being put to death. And he went on to say there's a strong possibility, if not probability, that if his identity were known, he would be pursued, resulting in grave and possibly fatal consequences. So that child was 2. It kind of rocked the city for a long time. That 2 10-year-old kids. I won't give you the details of what they did. I read the whole document when I was working on social services cases. It really beggars belief that one child would do that, never mind 2. But they served their time. Whether it was long enough is for the authorities to state, not us. But if they served their time and behaving themselves, then they don't need vigilantes from 26 years ago chasing after them. Like I said, we can all debate whether they should have been let out. Given what they did, perhaps they shouldn't. But perhaps if the mother wasn't shoplifting at the time and was looking after the child wouldn't have gone missing. So there's a lot of mistakes surrounding that case. A lot of people, those 2 kids dragging that 2-year-old for near 3 miles, and no one stopped them. The kid was screaming. But I don't think vigilantes 26 years on, maybe I'd be different if it was my child, I don't know. I just don't think it helps. Won't bring the child back, will it? OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma LP is exploring filing for bankruptcy this week to address potentially significant liabilities from roughly 2,000 lawsuits alleging the drug maker contributed to the deadly opioid crisis which is sweeping across the United States. People familiar with the matter have said the potential move shows how Purdue and its wealthy owners, the Sackler family. Did you know, if you remember a recent show, that you'll be unsurprised to know that the Sackler family were born in New York to a Jewish family? Seeing the picture here? And they are under pressure to respond to mounting litigation accusing the drug maker of misleading doctors and patients about risks associated with the prolonged use of its prescription opioids. Purdue predictably denies the allegations, arguing that the US FDA approved labels for its opioids. Well, it was, but they're just as corrupt. You know, these are the same people that promoted, at the request of Donald Rumsfeld, aspartame. And carried warnings about the risk of abuse and misuse associated with the pain treatments, and filing for Chapter 11 protection would halt the lawsuits and allow Purdue to negotiate legal claims with plaintiffs under the supervision of a US bankruptcy judge. It's a bit like Monsanto. Watch Purdue get swallowed by another company. That's how they do it. And shares of Endo International PLC and Insist Therapeutics Inc., which are 2 companies that, like Purdue, have been named in lawsuits related to the opioid crisis, closed down 17% on Monday. Final news item before we go into some Q&A. Musician R. Kelly was taken into custody Wednesday after failing to comply with a judge's order that he pay more than $161,000 in back child support. More than an hour after Kelly entered a closed court hearing in the Daly Centre, he walked out accompanied by Cook County Sheriff's deputies, who then put him in custody. And the hearing was held by Judge Laurie Rosen, who last month warned Kelly that he faced jail time unless he paid the child support and also the interest. Now, during Wednesday's hearing, Kelly was found in contempt and ordered into custody, according to Cara Smith, the chief policy officer at the sheriff's office, and he must pay $161,663 to be released from jail, she said. Now, his next court date is March 13th, and the arrest comes less than 2 weeks. Yeah, that, Dave, 2 weeks. After Kelly put up $100,000 to be released from custody on criminal sexual abuse charges. That man should be locked up. I had the misfortune of having to tidy up a house that R. Kelly had rented in Florida. I've never seen anything so disgusting in all my life. In fact, if I was the owner of the house, I would never step foot in that house again. I'd have made him buy the whole house. And he was with 13 and 14-year-old girls. We all knew. And yes, like others, he continues to walk around free. Q&A. How come Hillary has body doubles? Well, if she is a clone, why wouldn't they make them look the same? Well, they only have to be similar. Most people don't notice the subtle differences. They just think, oh, they've changed the hair, or they've dyed the hair, or whatever. Most people don't notice. You know, we exposed Hillary's double, was it 2 years ago? Maybe 2.5 years ago. I think her name was Teresa Barnwell. It came up today again on the Facebook page. They look similar. So when Hillary looks a bit fatter, that's Teresa Barnwell, and she has others. As far as I'm concerned, she died on September the 4th, a few years back. But they only have to look similar. This is the problem, and people don't notice. Why should they think that that's not that person? And yet, if you go and type in Hillary Clinton, you'll see about 4 different people, maybe more. You type in Britney Spears, you'll see about 6. Lady Gaga, an awful lot more. You know, people do change, but not drastically. Why has Donald Trump got orange hair one day and white hair the next? Go and look for yourself. Once you start really looking, then you see. But first, people have got to come to the conclusion that that's not them. To most people, that's utter madness. No, body doubles. And yet they watch movies and go to the theatre and watch movies and watch body doubles and think nothing. Is the movie fiction or is the movie fact? Is life fact or fiction? It all blares into the same. Kim has always said 50% of the people and 50% of the governments. I'm feeling strongly that the government shouldn't be given nothing, particularly the US government. Well, you could argue that point, but then you give 100% to the people, and it, for argument's sake, it gets divvied up and everyone gets a share. Are they going to invest it in infrastructure that we require? Are they going to invest it in building up businesses or industry? Not so much in America, but in other countries. Or will the people go on a spending spree so that there's nothing left? How many people will decide to go and build an organic farm with their money? How many people will decide that they'll pool it together and build a health centre? You know, there's lots of things that people in the community would like to participate in. But if everyone got their own money, how many would be willing to then still go and put the money in? It would be very few, and therein lies the problem. The problem is not so much the government, the problem is who runs the government, and there is the big difference. We need to remove the deep state people and the global elites and allow people in government to actually govern for and by the people. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with governments. Yes, we've given them far too much power because we've ignored everything they put forward collectively. But the governments are responsible for improving public health service and building new hospitals and adding technology for this, that and the other. How many of the people will spend their money investing in that? That's why it was decided that 50% goes to the government for development and infrastructure. That was made clear in a previous show. The people will not put their money in development and infrastructure because they'll say that's the government's job. So the government has to be given the funds to do so. I've not listened to your shows enough to understand what the idea or scope of what you're conveying when you mention the AI tech program. I've heard you recently say that it was ended. Are you referring to the satellites the Alliance took out that was put up by CERN? The Alliance did not take out the AI system, and it was not related to CERN in any way, shape or form either. Two completely different programs. Now the AI tech is linked to the Saturn moon matrix and also the electromagnetic field, which was ran by the parents and others, and that has been stopped from 2013 through late 2015. Now CERN was ended in real terms for the worst aspects of that program in August 2015. I think it was August the 27th, if memory serves me correctly. And that wasn't done by the Alliance or Simon Parkes either. So I hope that helps. But the Alliance they speak of is the SS small p. And I can assure you, none of the SS people are helping humanity one iota. There is no Alliance or SSP saviours. None. What is the current role of Italy in the evolution of affairs on this earth? Well, Italy is kind of dominated by a fake principality, isn't it? No? You know, everything, all roads lead to Rome. You know, like London and like Washington DC, those centres of power need to be crashed and taken over and given back to the people, all three regions. Now, the Pope said he was going to fix things. I've now heard that there's an inside coup to get rid of the Pope because he's decided he's going to fix things. Remains to be seen whether that is correct on either count. It wouldn't surprise me. But Italy is sadly lumbered like London lumbers the rest of the UK, and Washington DC lumbers America and its people. But hopefully one day the whole centre will collapse. How can we, the Patriots, take control of the narratives in school and university textbooks, including the teaching of how emotional IQ and brain IQ contend for domination one over the other? I think we're a long way from, technically we're not, but we have to get the basics correct in the teaching program. The basics are not right. Never mind the higher form of learning and understanding. We need a generation that understands life. At the moment, they understand bullshit and lies. Learning how to pass a test, that's not learning at all. It's not allowing children to think. And if you don't think, you follow. Just follow the script. Copy and repeat after me. Churning out zombies. They're all saying the same thing, only they're all acting the same way. So there's no allowance for critical thinkers or anyone who thinks outside the box. We have to seriously stop stifling the children, because it's hampered the progress of our species badly. And it's up to all parents to take an active role. Just because they go to school doesn't mean you can't stop teaching them in different subjects. Life lessons for a start. Vocational lessons. There's nothing stopping parents doing that. So we can be the change that can then push it into the schools and universities. Heard a lot about black goo and there being two distinct types of it. A loving one from this planet, as well as an alien one which is evil in nature. Can you comment on the validity of this, and are there two distinct types? Not to my understanding, there's only one. Like everything else, it can be light or can be dark, but there has been elements of an unbalance of the dark here, so it's highly likely that the black goo operates in the same way, but it operates also by the AI, which is largely, and in my opinion, has already gone down, the old psychotic AI anyway. Is this one of the real motivations for fracking? No. The only one time I ever heard Kim mention the more micro level of our daily living was when she said we will need to learn to manage our estates. So aside from the big picture changes happening, do those of us who are currently setting up our estates and taking back control still proceed onwards with that endeavour? I think by estates, I could be wrong, she means when we all get our sovereignty back. After the countries is declared sovereign, the object is to declare the people sovereign. And so they would then themselves have their own estate, because there's funds in the trust that belongs to everyone. So yes, we'd have to be more financially astute than we are currently in managing our estates and not giving it to middlemen, brokers and snake oil salesmen, one of which we'll cover later. So I think that's what she was referring to. In the past month during dream time, I visited the lower astral nightmare. In both instances I was being lured or harmed by people in the present that I have issues with. What is the meaning or significance of this? And I'm wondering that these people are presently trying to harm, or is it a coincidence, or using faces I recognise? Clearly I'm not shielding properly. Generally in the lower astral, it's less to do with humans. If you're recognising the faces, then it's more to do with your own intuition and perhaps your own fears as well. Of course, those two people that you've met may also be possessed. They may have hosts and it may be the hosts that are attacking you and not the person involved. So I hope that helps. It's kind of difficult discerning people's dreams and whatnot. A friend has an invoice for services from their local city. Before it was not paid, it will be charged to the property taxes. This year it is being not. Is this a change associated with the trust holding title to all property? No, it's not. Svetlana and Nikolai Levashov, as well as Anatoly Fomenko, reported on a war 7,500 years ago. It was also ended by the peace treaty. No, it wasn't. And it had been won by the positive forces, and as a result of it, the Great Chinese Wall had been built at that time. Yeah, that says that. I understand it, but not the peace treaty part. I don't agree with that. Isn't there any conflict to the martial law status on Earth since 16,500 years ago? Well, martial law, I'm not so sure I'm making sense of that question. Martial law ended in August 2016, ending 16,500 years of martial rule. So I hope that helps. Many of us would like to submit interesting projects helping and supporting mankind and nature. Nowadays, many of us only have present-day technologies available. Aren't those projects counterproductive, keeping in mind they will be made redundant as soon as, example, extraterrestrial technologies that are hundreds or thousand years ahead of ours would be given to mankind, or those presently hidden technologies would be freely available? There are plenty of technologies that are hidden in the trust, that are hidden in patents globally, and they will be released in stages, and it also has to be phased in and phased out. We've said this many times. People just think, oh, well, let's just have free energy. But it has to be phased in and phased out. Otherwise, a lot of people are going to get upset that they're going to lose their jobs. Now, this frequent reference in alt media that extraterrestrial technologies are hundreds or thousand years ahead of ours is bogus. A lot of their technology is our tech, not theirs. That's why they used humans as slaves, because of our creativity. And they've done it for thousands of years. We had advanced technology hundreds, if not thousands of years, and tens of thousands of years before some of these ET technologies. The Rus, 110,000 years ago, travelling in local and light distance ships. Vimanas, Vitmanas, Vitmaras. And no, they're not Indian. They're the Rus. So that was 110,000 years ago. Anti-gravity craft. But they always tell you technology is the future. It's not. It's way in the past. There is no new technology. We had free energy grids 200 years ago, until certain clowns decided to set fire to places or mud flood them or just deluge them, and then introduced old technology like digging for coal. It's old technology. It's not required, it never has been. But they can't make money on the other one. So, but I wish people would stop saying that the ETs are more advanced than humans, because they're not. Would we receive ET technology helping us, or would we basically depend on our own? We would depend on our own. We don't need their technology. Never have. Is it true that some of the UPU spaceships are more than 10,000 kilometres in diameter? No idea. Some of them may be bigger. So it depends on which type. Some of them are bigger than you can imagine. We have a giant spacecraft in the sky every night. Lights up. Sometimes in a crescent, sometimes it's full. I'll wait for time. Let's see if I can listening to your advice on cryptocurrencies, I'm surprised to see Argentina and Paraguay agreeing to a trade deal using Bitcoin, and the Marshall Islands planning on doing the same. Are they making a mistake? Yeah, but the problem is with those countries, they're being hampered badly. Of course, Argentina and Paraguay are both run by the Bush crew and Nazis. Do you know if anything's happening going forward with HR 25? Not currently. If we do get anything, we'll put it in the show. In one of Trump's speeches, where he was describing the types of people pouring into our country, he used the phrase people of all dimensions. Did he misspeak, or is there something more to that statement? Well, I don't know whether he did misspeak or not, but if he didn't, he's correct. A lot of fun and games in this country, particularly in the southwest region, as we found out this week with the Smokies. and they all went up in smoke. According to Harold Couch-Vella, the black goo guy, the act of learning to read is what gives birth to the ego and our mind chatter. Your thoughts on that? No, I don't agree with that. Sorry. The Urs taught the Rus Aryan Tartarians to build the structures contained in these recent Tartarian videos: gilded mansions, red and white brick power stations, the Vatican, all capital buildings, palaces and cathedrals, some of which seem relatively newer, but they're everywhere on the planet. Were they built by Tartarians, or was the technology hijacked? A case of both. The plans of the Tartarians were then used for the later date ones. We have, an unlimited amount of technology. The problem with technology is all of it is lazy man's tech, because we have our own innate abilities that we have decided to switch off or not use, or not put enough effort into switching back on. People moved whole tonnage of stones by vibration alone, or sounds, creating sounds. We don't need 50-ton dumper trucks. There's a lot of things we could improve if we only worked as much on ourselves. But yes, the Tartarians were building based on ancient tech. Of course, they did build not the Tartarian type, but the Rus, the Great Wall of Rus, not the Great Wall of China. And it's at least 7,500 years old, that wall, and it's still standing. And yeah, a little bit of wind in our country and everything goes flying. I would like to know what happens to the souls of the poor children and animals when they pass after being tortured and killed by the rituals. I think I've mentioned this a number of times. Some of them get completely consumed. It depends where they go. Some of them get chomped on, but most of them get consumed. Is there really a so-called twin flame or counterpart for each of us, or is this a program thing? The use of soulmates and all that is massively overplayed by the New Age group. There's lots of soulmates, and it all depends, like everything else, on what frequency you're resonating at. Now, there's soul groups and there's soul families and soul memory. We've all met people and we think, I feel like I've known them for years. Yeah, it's a frequency memory thing. But twin flames, it's a possibility, but I think it's massively overplayed. And a lot of us that are here were here in the past at certain times, and it's why so many of us are familiar, and why so many are drawn to each other at this moment in time. What is known about Deagle.com and about the reducements of the people? Deagle.com is a military site, so I don't know much about it. As for the reducements of the people, I don't know. That should have been done 7 years ago and it wasn't. Is Trump going to declare our sovereignty and end the Fed? He should have long done it, in my opinion. We'll see what unfolds in the next 2 weeks. I can see Dave jumping up and down now. With Gottlieb resigning from the FDA, what opportunity is for loosening the FDA sanctioning in the industries, and was Gottlieb a placeholder of sorts? It kind of remains to be seen of who he's replaced with. Too often replacements of being one rogue for another, for my liking, likes of Giuliano and a few others, so it's a case of wait and see. Shouldn't the peace treaty apply to most of us on the surface of the planet, as very few are truly native to this planet? In other words, does the peace treaty apply to anything with 46 chromosomes and 48 chromosomes? Indicates what actually is truly native to this planet. The peace treaty applies to all beings on this planet. I don't know why you're differentiating on it, but it applies to all. It applies to the smoky people who are here. It applies to the 39 beings that are below our feet, and it applies to every human. Now, as long as the others are not interfering with us, then the peace treaty is in place. What we do to each other is our own mess to correct. Thomas, I've noticed that there haven't been many earthquakes of 10 kilometres depth recently. Has that technology been shut down? Some of them have. Maybe they haven't got the funds to fire it up as much as they used to. They have to make cutbacks somewhere. Right, I think that's enough questions. I managed to get through quite a few. I watched the last one. I watched the video by George Cavasilas, who stated the pineal gland is a biological implant, and the chakra system is an energetic overlay implemented to control us. There's a few who have said that. People talking about removing them and all that rubbish. They are an energetic system that's there for a reason. Now, whether the pineal gland is something magical or not, it appears to be the case. I would think the third eye is far more important, and people say, well, that's the pineal gland. Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but the energy system, the problem is not that it's an energetic overlay implanted. The problem is it's been taken over by hosts, and it's not operating fully. And no, it's not hooked into the Saturn Moon system, or wasn't either. Right, let's have a musical break and then we'll go into some intel and the op-ed pieces. Hi all and welcome back. Right, let's get into some intel now. And gone too far up. There we go. Despite everything that the Man of World Holding Trust has done, some people still prefer to sit around and wait whilst clowns use all kinds of delaying tactics, and quite frankly we're getting a bit tired of it. And the latest that the clowns have come up with, and the elites that is being presented to Mr. Trump is they're introducing a new system. Remember the warning last week, March the 15th. I would keep note of that date because all hell could break loose. Their new system, according to them, is going to deliver the much awaited RVGCR payout, and all the banks and all the corrupt agencies and the corrupt politicians and the treasonous generals will all get their payouts at the expense of the American people, or so they think. Reality is it will fail like all the other attempts, and it's just another delay tactic which currently Trump has bought into. Now, Trump has allegedly given them till this date or the country will move on to a new way of operating. We'll see. Now, you all know by now there's only one avenue forward. One. And waiting for this new system and that new system, none of which have ever been brought to fruition. And this won't be any different, except that an awful lot more people are going to lose their jobs in the next few weeks, and an awful lot more money is going to sieve out of the country. As of Friday, the US Treasury was 27 million in the red. By Monday, that had reached 175 million. Why? Because they were all instructed to wait for Monday's payout, which failed again. And that's why the market dipped on Monday, and the clowns are trying to crash the whole economy between now and March the 15th as a backup. Again, another delaying tactic, which could have quite easily been shelved with one swift move. And yet we wait. Next item, Kim and the team. We were doing some regular maintenance over the weekend and rechecking the system for flaws and backdoors, and then she tried to do a transfer to see how many would chime into the system and watch it unfold. And she waited long enough for the numbers to mount up, and lo and behold, 647 hooks and viruses into the system were recorded, all looking and waiting to pounce on Kim transferring the funds. Now, 647 of them got deleted out of the system permanently as of Sunday. Oops. The Federal Reserve, now defunct Federal Reserve, on Monday was 125 million in the negative, and are now banking on the new system on March the 15th delivering, which is not happening as we know. On Monday, the Fed was in a total panic because the Rothschilds' fake Chinese elders' money didn't arrive again, and they're being put on the spot by military generals, Pentagon people, agency people asking where their pay is. So the Fed contacted us, and they were offered a deal between them and the Manor World Holding Trust. And the deal was to go from a private bank, which it currently is, to a public bank. And they were asked how much it would cost to do so. Now, the trust which owns the Federal Reserve would fund the transition on the proviso all of their 12 banks stepped down, and all of them stopped blocking funds, and all of them cleaned up their act. That was on Monday. Now, one of the reasons for kind of dancing with the devil was laid bare on Monday also for Kim and the team. Whilst Nero fiddled again, we have an issue in this country of the highest category of national security possibly this country has ever faced. As of now, all banks have zero liquidity. In fact, many of them are over 100% in negative liquidity, including the Federal Reserve, and the fact that all foreign currency reserves of US dollars held on behalf of most countries globally in the Federal Reserve has gone. All of it. Not just a few countries, all of them. They've vanished. All the USDs spent that are belonging to somewhere in the region of 150 to 180 countries. And when the rest of the world finds this out as a fact, we could end up with several countries wanting to attack us, either by mercenary or terrorist groups, or all-out war threats. It's that serious. All countries who had US dollars held on their behalf at the Federal Reserve is gone. All of it. And the same applies to all the gold reserves that were held also. And this is why President Maduro asked for all of Venezuela's reserves back. He knows. Now, if this is not the primary concern for all departments, then this country is doomed. Make no mistake about it, because once word gets out, we're in trouble. We're not concerned about mullahs and Comey et al. There are far more prominent things that need full attention, not tomorrow, like today. You have no funds. You only have one avenue of delivery of funds, and we can fix it very, very quickly if there's a will. And waiting for March 15th will only escalate matters, not improve it. Tuesday, with financial issues for the country ramping up and more prying eyes into the system than is necessary, and all of them were monitoring US dollars because of what had gone on the previous day. Most of it should not be prying into other countries' finances, like you, GCHQ, or you, Bank of International Settlements, amongst others. 37 different organisations, all following the flow of US dollars inside of America's banking system. All 37 got cut off from monitoring ever again. As of Tuesday, only the United States Treasury can now monitor US dollars going forward. So this is what's going on. The clowns are just delaying and delaying and delaying, and Nero's fiddling, in my opinion. He should have fixed it. He's had numerous opportunities. One hopes that the March 15th deadline is really ultimatum that he's given is correct. Because if it goes beyond, we're not bailing out again. We're just not. We're tired of doing all the work for no money and no return to keep you afloat while Rothschilds et al. Call the shots and Mnuchin's. Why haven't you fired him? He's been fired twice. Why haven't you chucked him out? Country's burning, Mr. Trump, and you'll go with it. You better act quickly, and that is my opinion only, to make that clear. Right, let's get into some of the op-eds. Just a pity we didn't have the the fun hammer piece to deliver ready for today. So that would have softened some of that intel. But we have good weeks and we have and blowback weeks, and it is what it is, and we'll always call it as it is. If it's positive, I would sooner put positive out, but sometimes it isn't, sometimes it isn't. So this was going to be a news piece, but I've decided to put it in the op-eds because I've covered this previously on excessive wages or salaries, and the heiress Abigail Disney spoke out this week and thinks corporate America is being paid too much. Hear, says us all. Now, she's the granddaughter of Roy Disney, co-founder of the Walt Disney Company with brother Walt Disney, and she said CEOs in general are paid far too much, and this was on CNBC's Squawk Box show, and she did refuse to comment on whether she thinks the current Disney CEO Bob Iger is paid too much, but she did say if your CEO salary is 500, 600 or 700 times your median worker's pay, there's nobody on earth worth that. Jesus Christ himself isn't worth 500 times his median worker's pay. Now, on Monday, Iger agreed to a new compensation contract that cut his maximum potential annual pay by $13.5 million. It cut it by $13.5 million. He was awarded $65.6 million in the last fiscal year, and a result of a pay bump for extending his tenure at Disney through 2021, and stock awards in excess of a further $35 million. And this year, however, the company eliminated a $500,000 boost to his base salary. Like, that makes much of a difference to $65.6 million. $500,000. Woo. Keeping it at $3 million, another bonus. It also cut his potential cash bonus from $20 million down to $12 and reduced his long-term pay incentive from $25 to $20 million. Now, Disney has long been a proponent for lowering executive paychecks and taxing the rich more, it said, and the problem is that there's a systematic favouring of people who have accumulated enormous amounts of wealth, she said. Disney signed on to a letter with about 200 other millionaires living in New York last month, asking lawmakers to introduce a millionaire's tax on households earning more than $5 million a year to help fund affordable housing, infrastructure and other initiatives. Sounds good to me. Now, like I said, the reason I put this op-ed piece in is because I've covered this recently, the issues of this and excessive earnings. And there is two problems with this. Is Abigail Disney, along with Alexandra Cortez, now promoting higher taxes on the rich for the benefit of the people, or is this a backdoor, sneaky attempt to keep the corrupt IRS going? The reason I say that is they'll get people to vote for higher taxes on the rich. Is then the people voting to consent to continue the IRS, is it not? This is how they work, you see. Most people they know will, yes, let's tax the rich far more. But that's keeping the old system, not the new one, which doesn't include the IRS. See how they work? We have a proper revenue service body that's been defunct since the 30s. That needs to be opened back up. The IRS has nothing to do with America, it never was. But this is how these people play the game. So Abigail Disney is correct in most of what she says, but I just wonder, is this a backdoor attempt to keep the old corrupt IRS going, where they'll throw a bit more into the pot, but the rest the money is not going to the people, it's going to the Rothschilds. That's how they work. Now, the issues of higher earnings has to be addressed, as I've said. I don't think personally anybody needs to earn over $250,000 a year, never mind 65 million. You know, it's beyond evil, to me, those levels of earnings. But let's look at the figures. If Disney paid a worker $20 an hour and they worked a 35-hour week, Bob Iger's salary would cover 1,802 people's yearly salary. 1,800. Now, Disney hours are 40, and most of them are paid $9 or $10 an hour. That equals to 3,153 people's yearly salary for just one CEO. 3,153 people working a whole year earning the same as one CEO. You know, how does what is generally an overweight lard arse equate to earning the same amount of money as 3,153 people working 40 hours a week for a whole year? Because I guarantee Mr. Iger doesn't do 40 hours. Probably doesn't do 40 hours a month, never mind a week. Well, how does $65.6 million a year equate to the 6.5 million people of Haiti who are earning $2 an hour? Now, some of these salaries, we know, they're inflated so they get round the corporate tax structure. That's what they do. They divvy it all up in bonuses to get round the corporate tax structure. But if the corporate tax structure itself was clean and transparent and fair, there's no need for these levels of earnings. And this is why I set up the People's Club earning structure as a proposal for those who are funded. As I don't believe anyone in any company should be earning more than 5 times the lowest salary. There's no need for it. It's beyond obscene, and it creates haves and have-nots. And for those who like to pry and make comparisons, my salary for the People's Club, when it starts, it hasn't yet, was set at $50,000 a year. You see, need, not greed. Not $500,000 a year or $4.5 million like some of the charities. There's no need for it. There's a couple of sobering statements. If you have food in your fridge, you've got clothes on your back, a roof over your head, and a place to sleep, you are richer than 75% of the world. Think about that. If you have money in the bank, any amount, money in your wallet, any amount, it can be 1 cent, or some loose change lying around the house, you are in the top 8% of the world's wealthy. It's all about perspective, isn't it? And something we often forget when waiting for the $1 million payouts and fake RVs or GCRs or Nasara. We are actually richer than most in the Western world. And whilst many of us are struggling in some way, it pales into insignificance compared to some of the levels people around the world are enduring. Haiti, $2 an hour, 6.5 million people earning $2 an hour or less. And then you get these excessive CEO salaries, $65.5 million a year. Some people don't earn that in 2 or 3 lifetimes. And we have to end it. Because if you're going to create a civilized society where all people prosper, not just a few, those levels of wages have to drop considerably. And I would like to see all companies operating 5 times the lowest salary, the top earner. That's it. Everything else is just greed. What are you going to do? But buy 2 cars or 3 cars instead of 2? It's waste. And it keeps the debt cycle going, and then it creates division, haves and have-nots. People feel insecure because or lower value because their car is 10 years old, and then next door's buying one every 12 months. It's not good. Next op-ed piece. The 14 defining characteristics of fascism. Thought I'd bring that up this week. Which is, fascism is kind of related to Germany, but is no more German than communism is to Russia or China. All rolled out by the same largely hidden elements, all rolled into labelling countries and their people, when it is a hidden program that has gone on for thousands of years. Now, all Americans should take note of this in particular. They have ran a program here for a long time on the people about how America is the greatest, the bestest, the fastest, and the leader of everything from sport to military. But it's a program, and it's a false mask program to hide the real intentions. In the UK, we called it buttering people up. And once it sticks in the psyche, it's a bit like being called the chosen ones. The ruling element play havoc with those people, as they are too preoccupied with we are the greatest, and they stick with that because it feels nice and it feels comfortable. But reality tells you different. And whilst they're sticking with that we are the greatest, everything gets stripped away behind them before you even notice. It's a psychological game that has been played on the peoples and countries, and is just as devastating as the divide and conquer program. I remember first time I went on a forum, I got banned for exposing the Mossad people on the forums dictating certain opinions. But before I got banned, I was on a mainly American forum, Disclosed TV it was called, and I think it was somewhere, or was the one before that, maybe the one before that, around 2000, the middle 2000s time, and I was reading what people said mainly, and then I would chime in with a hammer and watch how it all unfolded. And my hammer that particular day was America is the Fourth Reich. And the replies was, don't talk stupid. You don't think us Americans would fall for that, do you? And my reply was, you already have. Look around. Not possible. And there was mass indignation was abound, except one person who says, you know, I never thought that, but I can see where you're coming from. But we have the Constitution and a Bill of Rights. And my reply was, when you research deeper, you'll find you have neither. It's all an illusion. So let's see how many boxes it ticks. 14 different characteristics of fascism. 1. A powerful and continuing nationalism. 2. A disdain for human rights. 3. An identification of enemies as a unifying cause. 4. Supremacy of the military. 5. Rampant sexism. 6. Controlled mass media. 7. Obsession with national security. 8. Religion and government intertwined. 9. Corporate power protected. 10. Labour power suppressed. 11. Disdain for intellectuals and the arts. And 12. Obsession with crime and punishment. 13. Rampant cronyism and corruption. And the final one, fraudulent elections. The definition of fascism. Bit uncomfortable, isn't it? Now, fascism is not just another label. It's a program. And fascism and how it is ran is no different from the modern day communism is ran. And neither is democracy. That is the biggest oxymoron ever, that. Socialism, again, it's no different. Republic is a reference to Rome and the houses rule. And then we have the terms left, right and centre, conservative and liberals. They're the cabal's joke on the people to distract them even further. It just boggles my mind when I hear those terms. Because when you really step back and think on it, absolutely zero of it makes any sense. I'm a left-leaning conservative, they say. I mean, what in the source does that mean? I'm a left-leaning conservative. Have you had a stroke and your torso is leaning to the left? And if you are a conservative, do you dress blandly? Oh, I'm on the right. Okay, so you had a stroke down the other side then. Or, I'm a right wing. Are you a bird? I mean, what does it all mean? Do people not stop and think about these terms? But doesn't being right-leaning subsequently equal fascist? No, not me, I'm not a fascist. But you said you were right-wing. Right and left wing are both military terms. That's where it comes from. I'll remind you of number 4 in that list, the supremacy of the military. Why are we using military terms in government? Because it's fascist and fascism, that's why. So now you can see why a state we have to think, really think, then think and act different. You know, it's just beyond the joke. But I hope that makes people really think. We are in the Fourth Reich, not heading that way, we are. Another massive coincidence popped up again this week. Democrats in both houses for legislation, and I wanted to highlight one particular person, two actually, a guy by the name of Benjamin Cardin, or Cardin, Democratic Maryland, and co-sponsored by Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer. That would make it a felony for Americans to support the international boycott against Israel, commonly known as BDS. And according to this new bill, anyone found guilty of violating the prohibitions will face a minimum civil penalty of $250,000 and a maximum criminal penalty of $1 million and also 20 years in prison. And according to the ACLU, the Cardin legislation would bar American persons from supporting boycotts against Israel, including its settlements in the Palestinian-occupied territories, conducted by international governmental organisations such as the UN and the European Union, and it would also include penalties for simply requesting information about such boycotts. Violation would be subject to a minimum civil penalty of $250,000. So this bill essentially would impose civil and criminal punishment on individuals solely because of their political beliefs about Israel and its policies. Fascism, anyone? Let's look into Benjamin Cardin, shall we? You'd be surprised to know, a bit like Bill de Blasio, Benjamin Cardin is not his original name. Oops. It's Kardonsky. Born of Jewish parents in Russia. He's a member of the Pi Lambda Phi, which incorporates Phi Beta Delta and Beta Sigma Tau and Beta Sigma Rho, which is predominantly Jewish, but the Pi Lambda Phi has a distinct Egyptian flavour on its crest. Oh my. Now, Mr. Cardin, or Mr. Kardonsky, has been re-elected 9 times and hardly ever faced serious opposition, and he even ran unopposed in 1992. Back in the fake election, which is the 14th description of fascism, of fraudulent elections, back in the year 2000, a round of redistricting, his district was completely redrawn to add significant portions of Anne Arundel County, including the state capital of Annapolis. His last, or his 2 previous opponents, both hailed from Anne Arundel and nearly carried the district's portion of that county. Benjamin Cardin, whose real name is Benjamin Kardonsky. Again, Jewish parents, this time born in Russia, probably one of the Bolshevik crew. People need to wake up. How are we for time? 1 hour. So we have a music break. Maybe. Let's have one song. There's something a bit different about us all being together. We're all in this together. Too right we are. At this point I was going to read out the history of the IRS, but I have an appointment straight after this show, so I'm probably going to leave that until it's 3 pages long. It gives you the full history of the skullduggery that went on, and all the various acts starting in 1913 up to the modern day. So maybe I'll cover that next week. But in light of recent pieces to do with Randy and Shane, we've covered possession, I felt I needed to bring up this piece for this week. We kind of live in currently what is an overtly sexual and promiscuous society these days. But the question that people need to ponder on is, do people stop to consider the consequences of that? And the reason why is entity attachment through sex is just one aspect nobody seems to be even aware of. Someone mentioned the term tantric sex in the chat this week. I'll cover that later. That's what kind of got me to write this piece. Well, firstly, you must come to understand just how truly powerful sex actually is. You know, when you think about it, it's through sex we actually create life here on this planet. And it's powerful on a level that most of us never even consider. Now, the danger aspect is the sex magic that has long been known by occultists, and they know full well about its ability to manifest not only life, as in human life, but many other human desires or needs. And engaging in sex opens up an energy vortex. That's what happens. And depending on who you're sleeping with, that can also open you up to whatever he or she may have harvesting on their energy. I can hear an awful lot of gulps now. Entity attachment through sex is real. I mean, you really need to start taking it seriously. Now, sex between a truly loving couple literally has the ability to anchor essence energy down into this reality. And this is one of the reasons low vibrational sex is encouraged by society, because if sex is coming from a place of darkness, a lack of love or lust, then that type of energy and those type of entities are coming down with it. And it will be of a parasitic and negative nature. So the society where it's all about a drunken one-night stand where nobody wants to commit is harming us in ways we don't really understand. When you have sex with someone, you remain energetically corded to them for 7 years, whether you're still with them or not. Now, some argue that it's for life, but my knowledge says it's 7 years, which may coincide with the blood cycle changing every 7 years also. Unless you have the ability to do energy work and cut the cord, which most people can't do. You can cut a previous sexual connection cord away, but sadly very few are aware of it. Now, a one-night stand, a woman can actually take up to 50% of the man's karma. Oops. That's the energy transfer exchange. You're also effectively, potentially passing on and sharing that person's entity attachments, which can then start to change your own habits and behaviour. Now, it's quite common to see that if a relationship is toxic, the less toxic person can actually start to take on the personality traits of the other person. And we have to understand that we live in a multi-dimensional reality with different forms of consciousness that exist just outside of our visible sight. And much of these consciousnesses are distorted and reside in what some would call 4D, I call the astral plane. And as you've all heard, many of them are parasitic bottom feeders, and they're just waiting for an opportunity for you to open yourself up. And this is why sex is one of the 5 hooks. Religion, alcohol, drugs are the others. And it's also another avenue of possession, particularly with anal sex. The occult practicing people know this all too well. And this is why it's used mainly on young boys in the pedophile circles, because that particular practice is far more powerful. Sex magic. These people are sick. Now, I did a piece last March about 85% being synths, which kind of didn't make full sense. It fitted, but it didn't. But then I altered my perspective a bit to suggest that the 85% of this planet is actually infected with host possession. It made more sense than the 85% synths, did it not? And perhaps now people will begin to see the possibility now that that prediction is far more correct than people thought. And this is why this planet is so messed up. With so many avenues available for possession, it becomes a real problem. And another one of the New Age programs that was pushed onto the public as being all love and light is tantric sex. Having listened to all of the above, perhaps a rethink of that should be looked at, should it not? And if you're not certain of that, and remember my recent shows about the Kali Ma and the dark practices that came out of India and spread into Egypt, then into Europe, tantric sex started in India. Oops. And is wrapped into Hinduism and Buddhism, both of which are bastardized and corrupted versions of the Vedas. Something to ponder. I was sent this poem by one of the members. I don't normally read poems, but sometimes I read out things that people send in, people taking on the system in California. Was it Siskiyou County or something like that? I've done a few of them anyway. And I thought that I'd read this poem out. It's only a short poem, because it fits in nicely what I described back in 2015 as the masks of illusion. And it goes as follows. One night a poem came up to a poet. From now on, it said, you must wear a mask. What kind of mask? Asked the poet. A rose mask, said the poem. I've used it already, said the poet, and I've exhausted it. Then wear the mask that is made out of a nightingale's song. Use that mask. Oh, it's an old mask, said the poet. It's all used up. Nonsense, said the poem. It's the perfect match. Still, try on the God mask. Now that mask illuminates heaven. It's a tight mask, said the poet, and the stars crawl about in it like ants. Then try on the troubadour's mask, or the singer's mask. Try on all the popular masks. I have, said the poet, but they fit so easily. The poem was getting impatient. It stamped its feet like a child. It screamed, then try on your own face. Try the one mask that terrifies. The mask only you could possibly use. The mask that only you could wear out. The poet tore at his face till it bled. This mask, he yelled. This mask? Yes, said the poem. Yes. But the poet was tired of masks. He had lived too long with them. He snatched at the poem and struck it in his face. Its screams were muffled, it wept, it tried to be lyrical, it wriggled into his eyes and mouth. Next day his friends were afraid of him. He looked so distorted. Now it's the right mask, said the poem. The right mask. It clung to him lovingly and never let go. That was from one of the members of a poem written by a person from my hometown in Liverpool in England. So I hope that was of value. Final piece tonight is another one of THI's exposures. And it has to be done. I've kind of ignored it for a while. But we at THI and Manor World Holding Trust are kind of used to low-level idiots playing games or trolling or other shenanigans, all designed to throw us off track. And the latest clown I will address tonight is not only a paid shill, but also an outright criminal as well. So let's shine the spotlight of another corrupt alt-media person, shall we? Now, I've had to endure a continuing email onslaught where they accuse Kim of fraud dating back to 2009, and yet despite repeated requests to supply evidence, none was forthcoming. Also, several lewd emails accusing Kim of sleeping with all and sundry. Again, no evidence was supplied because there is none. Claims of fraud against me, which again, David Ray, aka Bubba, aka Barry Bigham, refused to provide proof or anything resembling evidence, because there is none. So David and his criminal connections decided to make stuff up and then use blackmail and extortion to try and profit from. Now, like his website, the whistleblowers.info, it also fails to provide any evidence against anyone he's accused on that website. And when people approach him to remove them from their website, as evidence has shown he was just posting random people or stealing data from other websites who have done proper criminal organisations, David Ray then chose to demand money off people who were wrongly accused to remove them from their website. Check it out for yourself. So here's what we know. David Ray, who owns the whistleblowers.info site, provides no evidence to support a single claim on his website. David Ray works for Blackwater and possible links to the SSP given his location. And also given his location, I suspect Dean Chambers of Cosmic Voice and the Keenan Group is also involved. It fits his forte. But David has criminal records for fraud himself. David is involved in security scams and operating without a licence, as he was exposed in this piece by a bond seller in August of 2014. They are selling securities in the United States of America and beyond without a licence. The securities are selling are bogus because they do not own them, even though they say they do. They use a false offshore bank and people are falling for it. Also of more concern from what I read is what they started off by selling bullshit security from other clients who they trust, only to turn on the clients and then blame the clients for giving them the securities to sell in the first place. In other words, a large-scale criminal organisation. And yet this website says they are hunting down the villains who brought them the securities when it was these criminals who were selling them. Now, an ex-senior investigator of the whistleblowers was a guy by the name of Sanjay Kalpoe. Now, David and his partner Sanjay Kalpoe, who has since left David's scamming exercises, only for David Ray to then turn on him and add him to his fake website. Go and check it out. Traitor Sanjay Kalpoe. In July of 2015, things turned out differently. According to David Ray, ex-investigator Sanjay Kalpoe commits internal treachery for low motives and can be bribed to his professional financial advantage and deletes without warning. And then we had a government expose, the whistleblowers.org. This website and its owners are already known for publishing information that does not correspond to reality and have not been adequately proven. It is owned by David Ray, US citizen, and Sanjay Kalpo, a Dutch citizen, and is housed in a pirate service company whose owner has already served prison sentences. Also, the owners and the manager of the website, Ray and Kalpo, have had several reports of fraud and must comply with pending imprisonment. So it's not the best example to say who is right or wrong. They leverage their contracts to offer investment programs that are a pure scam. As of 2016, David Ray had an outstanding arrest warrant waiting for him, and he's fully aware of it. And at that point, David Ray fled. Both David and Sanjay. And the reason being is that they were laundering money and assets as much as possible while blaming others for the very same thing if their deal does not close. This is according to the several complaints on the complaintsboard.com DAMAR, D-A-M-A-R, Global Investment Group. So you can go and check that out. Sanjay Kalpo and his partner Anthony Heavenrich are being investigated by the SEC for not being licensed bankers, and yet he claims he owns a bank and has defrauded many investors with his Gmail bank address. So you can go to the SEC site where he's been reported for bank fraud, as well as his two partners David Ray and Sanjay Kalpo. So that's www.sec.gov. Adult Audit Task Force. There is 17 fraud complaints for David Ray, aka Bubba. Then we find two separate rip-off reports. David Ray, or David John Ray, listed as living in Maryland, but works for a real estate in Washington State, according to him anyway, with a website, and his website is owned by a bent cop in India, of all places. Certainly gets about, doesn't he? But people on the run always do. So according to this site, the rip-off reports, he blackmails financial people for financial gains. He proclaims to have access to a banking world, but only produces words but no evidence of his professed experience or relationships. He presented in the past fraudulent gold certificates, fake instruments, fake sovereign accounts, fake funds, fake contracts, and links to the top 50 banks, plus fake JV and contract agreements. This person who made the complaint, I have had personal experiences with David Ray and his partner in crime, Anthony, claiming to be the owner of instruments and funds, when in fact everything he presented was fraudulent, bogus, fake, leased, and not owned in any way. David has asked me for money from investors many times to enter into programs or commodity opportunities, none of which were successful. And when it comes time to pay out opportunities, he will in fact make up many excuses, blaming everyone else why the opportunity has not worked, or that the funds were locked up in a court hearing, locked up in a trade opportunity that has been investigated, where in fact there was never an opportunity in the first place. Furthermore, Malaysia Forex Brokerage recently put out a warning. Blacklist 8211, urgent communication, David John Ray, Anthony Heavenrich, Sanjay Kalpo, scam company. If you come into contact with these guys, call the police or the FBI. David John Ray and his friend Antonius Richard de Callo, aka Anthony Heavenrich, from Holland, with the help of a false bank called Testudo Capital Asset Management and their link Eurolink Investment Group, They collect passports and bank documents. Then they post all these documents on their website, the whistleblowers.org, and then says you are money launderers. So they're getting clients to give them details of documents, and then putting their clients' details onto the website and saying they're money launderers, they're involved in scamming, and if you want to get released off our website, you have to give us money. This is David Ray, aka Bubba. If you have contact with these two guys, this is the Malaysia Forex brokerage. Call the FBI or police immediately, because they are scammers. And they stole €40,000 from two customers. Testudo is a ghost bank. They do not have the permission to use the word bank. It is a fraud. And they offer MTNs, a medium-term note, is a debt note that usually matures or is paid back within 5 to 10 years for their Ponzi 8217s system. And there's more. It recently come to the company's attention that certain individuals have established and published a website purporting to be a platform to expose banking, NGO and government corruption, and some of the more recent iterations thereof have linked Al-Masah, M-A-S-A-H, to alleged corruption and criminal activities by publishing false statements which suggest that our company is involved in alleged international banking scams using fake ABN AMRO documents. The website is established and maintained by Sanjay Kalpo, Mr. David Ray, Anthony Hemmelrich, aka Anthony Heavenrich, whose sole aim appears to be to discredit reputable individuals and organisations in various manners. However, the individuals themselves appear to have questionable backgrounds, and public records show that some of them have been accused of criminal activity, including blackmail, financial fraud crimes, including wire transfer fraud, and they've also been subject to bankruptcy proceedings. That was the company Al-Masah. The website is not associated to any regulatory authority. He is a fraudster. He is part of Damar Real Estate LLC, which is operating out of Washington State, and Damar Investment Group also, and is also linked to Damar International, which has a distinct trafficking flavour. We're going to look into that more deeply. This guy complained that he had invested with David Ray and Salpo and Damar, and he hid behind an email address and a non-regulated website. He is not financially regulated, he is not a lawyer, and has never shown any evidence of this, but he thinks he can try and ruin people's lives with threats so he can gain financially from blackmail. People who engage with him should also be recognised as fraudsters. No genuine financial entity would engage with this man, and if you ever come across this man, do not contact with him. He will make you believe he has contracts all over the world, but he has nothing, and is just a fraudster and a manipulator. That was money laundering procedure, financial fraud on the internet through Mr. David John Ray, Mr. Antonius Richard DeCallo, and also alias Anthony Heavenrich. You can find that on the internet. As I said earlier, David Ray's website is not owned by David at all, but Ranjit Kumar Sina of New Rohtak Road, Carol Bar, New Delhi, India. You're not involved in trafficking, are you, David? Oh my. Mr. Sina was a high-level cop in India who was involved in several controversies, accused of scuttling several high-profile cases that went to court, and yet still managed to keep his jobs or was promoted to a higher paid job. You can check that all out for yourselves. So this website is exposing criminals, they say, and accusing others of doing exactly what they're doing. The website was created and is under domain by Ranjit Kumar Sr. Why would a New Delhi cop set up a website for David Ray? I was also shown and sent evidence that innocent people were posted on his website and gave full proof that they were not the person David Ray and his criminal buddies were exposing, and that they were asking to be removed from the website. David Ray's reply: "Send me money and I will remove you." Several people sent that in. That is blackmail and it's extortion, David Ray. And if you think you're going to do that to us, you've got another thing coming, lad. Still got the hand cream out, David. Jack off. But this is a warning to all in the alt media, and further underlines my assertions that 90% of it is corrupted. Fake websites set up purporting to investigate crime and money laundering, when in reality it's a cover-up of their own crimes and all about cornering the market. You see, the agencies employ people to target successful businesses so that they go bankrupt and then they take over. This is what Ray and his bunch of so-called international criminals are up to. But if you look closely at his website, it actually exposes no one. The videos are between 30 and 90 seconds long, and it actually says nothing. No evidence, no proof. Just throw out some headlines and hope people judge it based on the headline, which sadly too many of us do. But you look deeper and there's actually no exposure of anyone. The only exposure on that website is something he lifted off a UK website. But Bubba's not alone in that fact, is he? Like Anna von Reitz and many others. But how quickly it all falls apart when you ask questions back. Oh, that stumps them. Then comes the distraction tactics, anything but answer the question or provide proof to support the claims. But they have none. And it's the same this week when one member, who clearly only came into the Facebook group, and she did not come in alone either. We know the patterns. She just came in to discredit Kevin Annett. She was asked to provide proof that he was a scammer, and yet none arrived. And it's the same with the crew recently who came in trying to link me and Dr. Naidu in a joint scamming exercise when I've had no real involvement with him since 2016. I looked into Dr. Naidu and his money platform, and I've said all along it could have worked. It really could have worked. Except a couple of years later, whether by naivety or not, I don't know at this point, Dr. Naidu chose to put the funds that he collected from 4,500 people, roughly $1.25 million, into HSB Hong Kong. That ended my involvement. Because there's no way that particular money laundering bank would ever pay out that fund. Ever. Kevin Annett, I can't see where the he is a scammer is coming from. The only way he makes money is writing books on his experiences and then selling them. But he's not forcing people to buy them, is he? I don't know whether he has a donation site or not. But again, donations are not compulsory, are they? Now, one book in particular, Kevin spent thousands of hours, I know this personally, working with 4, what were then men, who verified the Queen and Prince Philip took children out of a home in Canada and never returned them. Now, those 4 boys, or what were men at the time, were initially terrified to speak to Kevin. Why? Because Kevin was a pastor, or a former pastor, and they were terrified of church people due to the abuse that church people had handed out to them. But one by one, those 4 people learned to trust Kevin, and he wrote their story, in particular about William Coombs, who was murdered by the system in St. Paul's Hospital, Vancouver. No surprise. It involved the hospital, it involved the social services, it involved the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and it involved the church. And a cover-up at the highest levels of government. Now, to me, that work should be given credit, regardless of whether Kevin is a nice person or not. But no, these programmed peoples run around and discredit anything bad being exposed, like zombies, oblivious to the work and the threats this type of work entails. Kevin has done many thousands of miles, travelled all over the world, years of work highlighting the pedophiles, the church criminals and the elite ritual practices. Now, that is what I do know and can testify personally about Kevin Annett. And I also know he's had several threats on his life, and his life is severely disrupted also. He was blocked from entering into the UK to speak. Wonder why? Again, these are the facts that I know personally. As for Kevin's personality aspects, again, I met him and he appeared fine to me. Others have complained his behaviour is not good. I wasn't there, so I can't comment on it. I can only go on what I know, and in this case, what I saw. Maybe frustrations gets the better of Kevin at the times, I don't know. But I can understand and empathise with anyone trying to expose these criminals, the selfless devotion, the risks to your life and the sacrifices made, only for sad life internet warriors to spend their time looking for faults in others when the real faults are within themselves. Ain't that right, Bubba? It's all too easy to look for faults and discredit. It's a lot harder to work on your own faults. But it's quite a list of baggage to carry around when you're accusing others, like Bubba does. But poor Bubba was given a short straw, you see, by his Blackwater friends to take on and discredit 2 people who have had a plethora of security reports pulled on both of us to check out our background and see if they can find any sort of dirt. And sadly for them, neither Kim or I had none. Neither of us are attached to any of the 5 hooks either. Neither of us have got unbalanced egos. So the authorities have a big problem. How can they discredit or sway people with no easy paths? Simple. They use criminals who have been charged previously to do the dirty work and hoping some of it sticks, in return for a lighter sentence or a deletion of their crimes. Isn't that how it worked, David? You see, we know deeper than you realise. David is now stuck to working for the elites, the criminals. And he's not alone in that type of programme. There's quite a few in the alt media doing exactly the same thing. David has delusions of grandeur, you see. It's where you can pull them on the ego. I mix in high circles, he says. You sure do, David. And yet, despite mixing in high circles, you only have 47 listeners. Oops. Such a high-profile international organisation, and you've got 47 listeners. But those high circles, as we all know, David, are criminals. And they are playing you like a puppet. And you are dancing to an unrhythmical tune, David. As a matter of interest, have Blackwater paid you yet? Or was it just a reduced sentence for criminal enterprise? I hope they haven't paid you in dinars. It's like the real high-profile people, David. You won't be getting paid either. But David, like many others, these internet warriors, need help. Projecting false claims onto others is a clear sign of inner mental turmoil within and of themselves. And until he addresses his own failings of really scamming people, the evidence of which I've produced, you can go and check it out for yourself. It's all there. And he has no right to judge anyone. And that just doesn't apply to David either. Most projections of others are inner reflections of themselves, and why it's important we all address our own issues. Your fake website has now been exposed on a real international stage, David. With thousands of listeners, not 47. And you have a choice. Carry on your childlike games, or come and be a part of the solution, David. Working for the criminal elites, or helping the people. Choose wisely. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. We're going to play a song for David. Bye for now.